The last decade has been a total economic roller coaster. But for so many of us, there's been this one nagging feeling. My paycheck is definitely bigger, but I don't feel any richer. So today, we're going to dig in and figure out why. This is our 10-year investigation to find out who really got a raise.
So let's just dive right into the big question. Who really got a raise over the last 10 years? And when I say raise, I don't just mean more dollars hitting your bank account. No, I'm talking about a real increase in your power to buy things, to save, to actually build wealth. And let me tell you, the answer is probably not what you're thinking.
On paper, things look pretty good. The average paycheck in the US grew by a solid 42.7% over this decade. I mean, that sounds amazing, right? But this is exactly where our mystery starts. Because if our paychecks grew that much, why does it feel like we're all just treading water? And that's the puzzle we're going to untangle today. The big headline number versus the reality in your wallet. Okay, so to solve this thing, we gotta identify our main suspect, the villain of the story, if you will. There's one single number that was the big obstacle for everyone, the hurdle that every single dollar had to clear just to keep its value.
And our main tool for this investigation? It's something called the Consumer Price Index, or CPI for short. Basically, you can think of it as the official scorecard for inflation. It keeps track of price changes for a whole basket of stuff we buy. Gas, groceries, rent, you name it. It tells us exactly how much our money has lost its punch over time. And here it is, the big one. Over those 10 years, the cost of just living went up by 38.2%. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. If your income or your investments didn't grow by more than that number, you actually got poorer. You lost purchasing power. So this is our break-even line for this whole investigation. You can really split the decade into two completely different stories. First, you had 2015 to 2019, this period of calm they called the Great Moderation. Then, bam, the pandemic shock hit, stimulus money flooded the system, supply chains just broke, and prices went through the roof, creating this new normal we're in now. And knowing this backstory is super important for what's coming next. All right, time to open up our first case file. Let's look at the average worker. This is the person showing up every day, trading their time for a paycheck. So the big question is, did they manage to clear that 38.2% inflation hurdle? So again, on paper, it looks like the average worker did pretty well for themselves. The average hourly wage went from just under $25 to over $35. That's that 42.7% raise we were talking about. But that number alone, they beat inflation. But did they really? And here's the kicker. When you take that big 42.7% raise and then subtract the 38.2% inflation tax, the real gain in purchasing power was just 4.5% for the entire decade. I mean, that breaks down to an annualized gain of 1.1% a year. It's practically nothing. Almost the entire raise just vanished into thin air, eaten up by the rising cost of everything. One of the sources we looked at just summed this up perfectly with a quote from Alice in Wonderland. It's called running on the Red Queen's treadmill. It's that feeling, you're running as fast as you can, you're working harder, you're getting those raises, just to find yourself in the exact same spot financially. And that just brilliantly captures the story for the average worker this past decade. Okay, let's pivot to our next case file, the landlord. This is someone who owns capital, specifically in the form of a house or apartment. So how did they do in this race against inflation? And wow, the difference here is it's just night and day. The asset itself, the property, didn't just beat inflation, it absolutely crushed it. The real inflation-adjusted value of homes in the US shot up by over 43%. We're talking about passive wealth creation here. No extra hours, no overtime, just owning something. So what's the secret sauce here? Well, landlords had two powerful engines just printing wealth for them. First, the house itself was getting more valuable, way faster than inflation. And second, they were collecting rent every single month, a stream of cash that they could raise to keep up with, or even beat, inflation. But wait, it gets even crazier. The real game changer here is something called leverage. Let me just walk you through how insane this is. Let's say you buy a $200,000 property, but you only put down $40,000 of your own money. The bank covers the rest. Over the decade, that property's value almost doubles. Your little $40,000 investment has suddenly ballooned into $270,000 of equity. That's a 577% return on the actual cash you put in. It's a wealth multiplying machine that the average worker just doesn't have access to. Okay, on to our last case file, the shareholder. This is anyone who owns a piece of corporate America, maybe through a 401k or just a regular brokerage account.
And folks, the numbers here are, well, they're just staggering. If you owned a simple S&P 500 index fund, your cumulative real return was over 152%. And let me be super clear, that's after we take out that big 38.2% inflation tax. This is pure, unadulterated growth in your purchasing power on a scale that just blows everything else away.
Okay, so it definitely wasn't a straight line up. I mean, there were some absolutely brutal years in there, like 2018 and especially 2022, where you got hammered. But those were followed by some massive comeback years. The big takeaway, if you just held on through the chaos, the overall trend was massively, powerfully up. It rewarded anyone who just stayed in the game. Okay, we've looked at the worker, the landlord, and the shareholder. The evidence is in. It's time for the final verdict.
And this right here, this table tells the whole story of the last 10 years. The worker's real wealth from their salary, up a tiny 3.3%. The shareholder, up a whopping 190% in real terms. But look at the landlord, using leverage. Their initial cash investment grew by an incredible 254% after inflation. I mean, look at that. The gap between what you get from working versus what you get from owning, it's just enormous.
So let's put this in perspective. What does this actually mean on a year-by-year basis? For the worker, it was a decade of going nowhere fast, an annualized real gain of just 1.1%. It's like they were just treading water, trying to keep their head above that rising tide of inflation. Meanwhile, the landlord, they were cruising along building real wealth, averaging about 8% per year in real inflation-adjusted gains on their initial investment, a totally different world. And at the top of the pile, the shareholder. Their wealth grew the fastest of all, with an annualized real gain of almost 10%. If you just look at pure performance, owning stocks was, hands down, the most powerful way to get ahead. So, why? Why did things play out this way? Well, it really comes down to this simple but super powerful economic idea. R is greater than G. Basically, R, the return you get on capital, like stocks and real estate, was growing much, much faster than G, the overall economic growth where wages come from. And when that happens, the gap between the owners and the workers just gets wider and wider. And all of this brings us to one final, really important question you should ask yourself. Is your money working harder than you are? Because if this decade has taught us anything, it's this. In the race to build real wealth, owning a piece of the machine, not just being a cog inside of it, made all the difference in the world.